So inshallah we'll start now. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. Once again, I want to thank everyone for being here. It really means a lot to me, and I'm really grateful, as I said, to God, of course, and to Ali for allowing me this platform to speak. So we will get into the speech, which is part two of the course called Cultivating a Virtuous Character. Whoever missed part one, I think the slides and the audio are up if you want to catch up on whatever was missed. Um, Hopefully, even though you missed some stuff, this speech should it's full enough that I think inshallah you will gain from it even if you missed the first one. So I'm gonna get right into it, inshallah. So we'll change the slides. Forgive me, I'm not used to speaking online, so the slides and are a little uh, different for me, and I'm getting used to it. Uh, where? Oh, so yes, here's if you look at the chat, you have you have a link there to the first one. Um, so you can check that out anytime you'd wish. Okay, so Bismillah. I'm gonna start. So over here, as you see on the slide, it's a outline for this second talk, this one, and I'll start with a brief summary of last week. Then I will speak about the concept of representing God on earth, and then lastly, I'm gonna go, inshallah, into the subject of transformative practices that we can inculcate into our daily lives to inshallah make changes to help us achieve the states that we have been talking about in our sessions, in our first session as well as this coming session. Um, okay, we'll change the slide. Uh, okay, so last week we said that God created human beings for two interconnected purposes, and that it is only when we fulfill these two purposes that we are truly human beings. The first purpose we said is to serve God or to be a servant of God. This purpose is a passive act, and this act has an outward and inward dimension. Outwardly, being a servant of God means following his laws and injunctions as given to us in the Quran and as given to us in the Hadith. Sorry, is that better? I hope so. Given to us in the Hadith. Inwardly, being a servant of God means living in a state of surrender to God's will and therefore accepting whatever happens to us with faith and with patience. We said that this inward state is a state that is connected to peace, love, and guidance. Therefore, the station of servanthood is a beautiful station that we should continually grow in. And I use the word grow in because this station has many degrees or many levels, which we couldn't get into because of time constraints. But the Prophet, for example, told his followers that they should say that the Prophet is the servant and messenger of God. We cannot, of course, serve God at the level at which the Prophet did, but we can certainly serve God according to our own capacity, and we spoke about that last week. So today's talk is about the practical ways in which we can transform ourselves to fulfill our two roles as servants and representatives of God on earth. Before getting to that, meaning the practical ways, I want to speak about the second role, which we didn't really speak about, and that is representing God on earth. And I will change the slide now. Um, there we go. Okay. So to be a representative is an active role because it means to speak or act on behalf of your master. On the outward plane or the exoteric plane, it means to act in a way that God would want you to act in every situation. So, in other words, it means to act in a way, or it means to follow the course of action that you think is most pleasing to God. But on the inward plane or the esoteric plane, it means to cultivate godliness inside yourself so that you reflect and radiate God's names and qualities at all times. Now, please try not to feel too uncomfortable with the words I'm using. They're just words and they can be replaced with other words that make you feel more comfortable. it's very difficult to talk about spiritual states and put them into words. Also, though, we should remember the hadith of the Prophet that is mentioned in both Sunni and Shi'i sources, which is that indeed God created Adam in his own image. And also, as we'll see, we are not talking about we are not talking about becoming like God. Um, we'll see later. We're talking about losing our less human qualities. Okay. So, in any case, excuse me, in any case, in order to understand the role of representation better, I think we should think of an example, and that is the example of a president sending out an ambassador to another country. The ambassador's job is to try and act on behalf of the president. So a good ambassador would not worry about his or her own opinions or desires. So this is outward representation when you're not worried about what you want or what you think or how you feel, but instead you think about what is it that God would want me to do in this situation. Outward representation. But the president, being smart, knows that it is impossible for a person to represent him completely. So ideally, he would choose someone who acts and thinks the way he does. In other words, he would choose someone with a similar nature. And that is why we are qualified to represent God, because we have things in us that are reflective of his characteristics, God's characteristics. And so this is inward representation. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second here and just ask in this introductory period if we have any questions. Um, Please don't hesitate to ask questions because I have allotted time into my speech for questions so that we don't run over time. If you don't have any questions, of course, that is fine also. So I'll just wait for a few seconds here to see if we have any questions right now, and we'll move on. And I'm going to ask my wonderful wife to just, if she could get me some water. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on. If you give me a second here. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so the Quran explains the role of representation through the narrative of Nabi Adam alayhi salam, who is a prototype or the model of all human beings. So he is an actual person, but he also represents all human beings. According to the Quran, God breathed His Spirit into Adam and taught him the names of all things. So the Spirit and the knowledge of the names. Okay, in terms of the breath of God, the Quran states in Surah 38, verses 71 to 74, when your Lord said to the angel, surely I'm going to create a mortal from dust. So when I have made him complete and breathe into him of my spirit, then fall down making obeisance to him. And then the angels did obeisance, all of them, but not Iblis. He was proud and he was of the unbelievers. In terms of teaching Adam the names of things, the Quran says, He taught Adam all the names, then presented them to the angels. Then he said, tell me the names of those if you are right. The angel said, glory be to thee. We have no knowledge except that which you teach us. Surely thou art the knowing and the wise. He said, O Adam, inform them, that's the angels, inform them of their names. Then when he had informed them of their names, he said, God said, did I not say to you that I surely know what is hidden in the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you manifest and what you hide? So the breath of God means that humans are noble and holy creatures with the power and authority to represent God on earth. The knowledge of the names of things means that human beings can know reality through this, and through this knowledge, the knowledge of reality, they can put everything in its correct place, inside of themselves as well as outside of themselves. As we mentioned, the human being is made up of many parts, and it is only when the purified soul and the illuminated heart are in control of all these parts that a person is truly human. The idea of representing God by putting everything in its correct place is directly related to the Quran and the names and qualities of God. The Quran is a self disclosure or revelation of God. In other words, it is God revealing Himself to us. God reveals Himself to us. Why? He reveals Himself to us so that we may know Him, and through this knowledge, we may return to our true selves and eventually to God. This idea, actually, in some form or another, exists in every single major religion in the world. If you read the Quran, you will see that God is telling us who He is through His names and qualities. For example, in Surah 7, verse 180, we read, "And Allah's are the best names, therefore call on Him thereby, and leave alone those who violate the sanctity of His names. They shall be recompensed for what they did." The Study Quran's commentary of this verse says the following: each name is understood to possess a real divine presence or quality. For as Al-Tabrisi notes, there are no empty titles for God. In fact, in Islamic metaphysics, the whole of the cosmos, so the whole of the universes, are considered to be in reality nothing but the reflection of the divine names and qualities. Moreover, in Islamic mysticism, God is understood to be present in His sanctified names, each of which is a ladder leading to Him. Okay. In other words, the names and qualities of God permeate the cosmos in perfect balance and therefore allow the world to exist under divine command. For example, in Surah 65, verse 12, we read, Allah is He who created seven heavens and the earth the like of them. The decree or command continues to descend among them, that you may know that Allah has power over all things, and that Allah indeed encompasses all things in His knowledge. So this verse is saying God created the seven heavens, and His command goes through them. And so if His names are a reflection, those names are going through the universe and staying under the command of Him. Okay. In another verse, Surah 67, verse 3, it says, "Who created the seven heavens one above another? You see no incongruity in the creation, or no cracks or flaws in the creation of the beneficent Allah. Then look again. Can you see any disorder?" Similarly, it is only when we are permeated with the names and qualities of God in perfect balance and integration that we live in a state of tawheed, that is oneness within ourselves, and in a state of ihsan, that is beauty. In doing so, at the highest level, we reach what the Islamic tradition refers to insan al-kamil, that is a perfect or complete human being. Okay? Now, there's so much that we can continue to say about the states of servanthood and representation. However, this is an experience and a state of being that cannot be taught. It is something that has to be realized within every individual for themselves. Therefore, what I want to do is just to summarize the goals of these two stations and then move on to speak about how we can achieve them, inshallah. We talked about the two inward goals of servanthood and representation. The first is to be in a state of surrender to God's will. This is the same idea as polishing the mirror of the heart, or becoming a pure or empty vessel for God's will. Okay? The second is to reflect God's names and qualities, as we just mentioned, in perfect measure and balance. If we are able to reach this state, then we are able to see God in absolutely everything. For example, Imam Ali alayhi salam states, "In everything I see Allah before it, Allah in it, and Allah after it." Similarly, Imam Zain al-Abidin says, "O Allah, I don't know if I should praise you more when I am healthy or when I am sick." So obviously we can see that behind everything that's happening, the prophets and the imams and the saints of God see God's mercy behind it. They see the face of God behind it. Okay, so before going on to the next section, I'm going to stop again and ask if there are any questions or any clarifications. Sorry. If there are any questions or clarifications that you'd like to address that we can speak about. Anything? Don't be shy. I will try my best to answer. And again, you can put it in the attendee chat as opposed to the private messages so that everyone can see the question. Any questions? No? I think we're okay. We'll wait 10 more seconds. Okay. So we're going to move on to the practical side. What can we do in our daily lives to bring about to become true servants and representatives of God. Obviously, I cannot speak about everything, so I decided to try and speak about the things that are easiest and most practical to do so that you can start to use them today and slowly from there grow and grow and grow. We do have a question. I don't see it in the group chat. Um, the person that sent the question, could you send that to the group chat? I'll just give a second to see if that can happen. Um, oh, it's just a salam. Sadek, please. Oh, uh, yeah, your question here. Unless you're just saying salam, in which case, walaikum salam. Um, can you please elaborate on the sanctity of the names of Allah? Um, uh, so I think I will elaborate on them as we go along in the speech. Um, if you feel that as I go along in the rest of the speech I haven't elaborated on the sanctity of the names, then can you please remind me of your question and then I can try my best to answer it afterwards, if that's okay, inshallah. Okay. Um, okay. Thank you. So so I'm not going to talk about the importance of following the injunctions of God and always trying to act in the most beautiful way. I'm going to assume that you already realize how important this is. A lot of times we get worried about legal questions. Is this halal? Is this haram? Is this makruh? It's important, and I'm not saying we shouldn't ask these questions, but there's something even more important, and it's aside from if something is halal or haram, and that is becoming a beautiful human being. And so I'm going to assume that you are already trying your best to do what is right and good and beautiful. And so I'm not going to add that as a step of something you should be practicing. Okay? You should be practicing it, inshallah. Um, every time we do, sorry, forgive me. Every time we do anything wrong and dirty ourselves, it causes us to move away from God. God is pure, and we can only come closer to Him, and eventually return to Him when we are also pure. It's the only way. That is why hell is made of fire. It's actually a purifying element. Okay, and that is why some people will be removed from hell, because once the fire purifies them, and again, we are talking in symbolic language, um, somewhat depending on how what your own beliefs, but that's why we can also some people will leave hell and enter paradise afterwards. They will be purified. Okay, so the first act I want to talk about is simply one of awareness. It is to know that you cannot become fully and truly human except by the grace of God. Okay, so this is not really an act; it's an act of knowing. Okay, but you cannot become fully and truly human except by the grace of God. For example, in Surah 24, verse 21, God says, "O you who believe, do not follow the footsteps of Shaitan. And whoever follows the footsteps of Shaitan, then surely he, that Shaitan, bids you the doing of indecency and evil. And were it not for Allah's grace upon you and His mercy, then none of you would have ever been pure. But Allah purifies whom He pleases, and Allah is hearing, knowing." In one of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam's prayers to Allah, it's reported that he said, So assist me in obeying you, and grant me success to carry that which you made incumbent upon me, all which pleases you. For I have not seen anyone who has been able to attain something of your obedience, except that it was through your bounty upon him prior to his obedience. So bless me with a bounty through which I can attain your pleasure. So here we see even the Imams understand that ultimately it is God who is the source of all goodness, mercy, and guidance. All creatures depend on you are not hearing the audio? Is everyone else hearing the audio? Okay, everyone else is hearing the audio, so I'm going to assume it's on your end, Salim. So if you could play around with it and figure out why the audio isn't coming through to your screen, because everyone else is telling me they are able to hear it. Um, So we can understand that even the Imams understand that ultimately it is God who is the source of all goodness, mercy, and pleasure and guidance. All creatures depend on Allah, and there is no exception to this rule. So the suggestion, sorry to interrupt the speech, the suggestion was to exit and try again. Okay, thank you. Since we cannot achieve a virtuous state by ourselves, then throughout our journey in life, we have to remain in a state of patience and trust, knowing that God will do what is best for us when the time is right. God always takes care of his creatures. Okay, it is reported that the Prophet said, no fatigue, nor disease, nor sorrow, nor sadness, nor hurt, nor distress befalls a Muslim, even if it were the prick he receives from a thorn, but that Allah removes some of his sins for that. The paradox is that if we cannot achieve anything except by the grace of God, then why are we speaking about what we can do to achieve this virtuous state? This paradox is somewhat. Oh, there are Quranic references that allude to the fact that God will save people from paradise, will move people out of. So I'm sorry. So we have the question section when I stop to um, receive questions. So I will answer that when we get to that section, if that's okay, so that we can have a little bit of flow in the lecture, okay, or in the talk. Um, but I will get to that. Um, the paradox is if we cannot achieve anything except by the grace of God, then why are we here today speaking about how to achieve a virtuous state? I think this paradox is at least somewhat answered by the following hadith Qudsi. And if you know, this is a hadith that is not part of the Quran, but it is the words of God that the Prophet says, but it comes from God. And it says this: if my servant, and you've heard it all, it's very famous. If my servant draws near to me a handspan, I draw near to him an arm's length. And if he draws to me an arm's length, I draw closer to him by 2 arms' length. And if he comes to me walking, I go to him running. This means that ultimately it is God who comes to us, and ultimately it is God who transforms us. We simply have to make an effort. Imagine that a person is going to the king in order to ask for something. When the king enters the room, the subject only bows his head and waits for the king. He doesn't dare to speak or act unless the king says otherwise. In other words, the subject assumes a correct attitude symbolized in the posture of bowing in order to get what he came for. Similarly, we have to make an effort, just like the person came to the king and bowed his head, etc. We have to make an effort. However, in making our effort, we also have to assume the correct attitude and also wait for God's grace and mercy. This awareness is transformative. So just knowing this is a transformative because it forces us to turn away from the world and ourselves, okay, to stop thinking I can do it and I will achieve this, or if I go to this person in the world they will get me this, or etc. And it forces us to turn our face towards God, okay, and that's actually the meaning of conversion. When people convert from one religion to another, that's great. They convert from one path to God to another path to God, but conversion is truly, in its essence, it means to convert from the world to God. Okay. Now, here I will stop for questions. And so the first question is, what is the Quranic reference that people will be moved out of hell once they are purified? There are references in the Quran that speak to this. I don't know them off the top of my head, um, but if you do a search of this, you will find it, and also more than Quranic references that allude, because the Quranic references more allude to the fact that it will happen. There are hadith that talk about the fact that this will happen. This is one of the ideas of intercession. It's connected to it. But yeah, there are many hadith out there, and you just have to open a book or go on online nowadays and just search and find it. I can't give you a hadith off the top of my head or a Quranic verse, but I know I have read plenty. That's why I'm able to say it. I'm not just speculating here. Um, so if the Quranic verses that allude to it are true, and the hadiths are true, then it is true. Yeah. Are there any other questions before I move on? Nothing? Really? So I'm going to assume everyone that is listening understands where we are, what we're saying, no confusions, no clarifications needed, which then I'm going to assume that, Alhamdulillah, I'm doing a decent job of being clear. Okay. Yeah, I don't see anything coming. Okay, so we'll move on. Um, so this leads me to the second transformative. Am I on the right slide here? Okay, this leads me to the second transformative action that I want to talk about. Thank you. Talk about, and that is the act of prayer. Now, in all religions and in Islam, there are generally three types of prayer. The first is the canonical prayer. I can never pronounce it exactly right, but that's the 5 daily prayers that we do. The second type of prayer is the dua or the supplication. And the third type of prayer is the unceasing prayer of the heart. Okay. Now, what type of prayer I want to speak about today is dua or supplication. Okay. If you truly want to imagine, or sorry, not imagine, if you truly want to experience the unimaginable beauty that is inside of you, then you need to pray to God and ask Him to guide you to it, and also pray that when it comes to you, this guidance, that you recognize it and accept it into your life. Okay. A lot of times we pray for guidance, but when someone comes along with it, we are so kind of stuck in our own way of thinking that we're not open to the guidance that has come to us. Okay. So we have to be, if we're asking for guidance from God, then we have to be open to guidance from God. Fair? Um, Prayer is an easy and powerful thing to incorporate into all of our daily lives. This is because it is not confined by any space or any time. You can make it, for example, a nightly habit to speak to God before you are falling asleep. Okay? So, this is an easy habit that you can use in your life every single day. However you decide to do it, never underestimate the power of a sincere prayer. God says in the Quran, in Surah 2, verse 186, and he's telling Prophet Muhammad in this verse, God is telling Prophet Muhammad, and when my servant asks you concerning me, so he's telling the Prophet, when the people come asking about me, then surely tell them, I am very near. I answer the prayer of the person who prays to me when he calls upon me. So that is how God is telling the Prophet to tell the people about him, that he is near and that he answers the prayer of anyone who prays to him. And so that these people should also answer God's call and believe in God so that they may walk in the right way. Okay? When it comes to prayer, the Prophet describes it as the weapon of the believer, and Imam Ali alayhi salam states that prayer is the key of fulfillment and the key of success. And the best prayer is that which emanates from a pure breast and a pious heart. If we are being told that prayer is a weapon and that it leads to fulfillment and success, then why are we not speaking with God constantly and in an intimate way? In Shia Islam, we are fortunate because we have many beautiful du'as left behind for us by the Prophet and by the Imams. But if we only use these prayers or these supplications, then we are taking something that is simple, personal, and free and making it a little more difficult, impersonal, and confined. To be clear, what I'm saying is that we should use these du'as that we have in our tradition, in our faith, in conjunction with our own supplications. And then we should always remember God and call upon Him in every place, in every situation, in every time. Okay? So here again, I've made a pause for questions. Again, it can be about this section or clarifications. I think that was clear, but um, again, any questions are welcome. Okay, we'll continue. Okay, so the third transformative action I want to talk about today, and inshallah, I'll answer the question about the sanctity of God's names here. Um, the third transformative action I want to talk about today is the act of remembrance or dhikr. As I mentioned last week, Islam emphasizes the connection between remembrance and goodness on the one hand, and the connection between forgetfulness and evil on the other hand. This is because the scriptures, the prophets, and the other signs of God are given to us in order to remind us of what we already know in the depths of our being or in our fitra, our innate nature. For example, Surah 41, verse 53 says, "We will soon show them our signs in the universe and in their own souls, until it will become quite clear to them that this is the truth. Is it not sufficient as regards your Lord that He is a witness over all things?" And Surah 29, verse 51 states, excuse me, "And is it not enough for them that we have sent down to thee the book, which is rehearsed to them? Verily, in it is mercy and a reminder to those who believe." In fact, almost all of our Islamic practices, in some way or another, act to reawaken our memory. Now, in particular, I want to speak to you about the inner heart and God's names and qualities. We will start with the heart and then conclude our talk with the names and qualities. Now, I know last time I said we were going to not talk about the difference of the heart and the soul and the spirit. And we're still not going to get into the details because I don't think they're too necessary. But I do want to talk about the Islamic concept of the heart a little bit, at least, because I think a little knowledge about it is important. Okay. So last week we said that the essence of the human being is the soul. If the essence of the human being is the soul, then the essence of the soul is the heart. It is the essence of the essence or the center of the center. Again, it doesn't really matter about the differences. What matters is that you put these transformative actions into practice. If you do this, then by the grace of God, inshallah, everything else will fall into place, including your understanding of all these things. Because knowledge, real knowledge, or I should say wisdom, does not come from books and learning and speeches like this. It comes from the purified heart. It comes from God. Okay? Now, a lot of us seem to believe that wisdom is rooted in the mind's ability to reason. This is not accurate. Wisdom is supra rational. That means it is above and greater than reason. According to the Quran, wisdom and guidance come from the inner heart. For example, in Surah 22, verse 46, we read the following: "Do they not travel through the land so that their hearts may thus learn wisdom and their ears might thus learn to hear? Truly, it is not their eyes that are blind, but their hearts which are in their breasts." Similarly, in Surah 29, verse 49, it says, "Nay, here are signs self-evident in the hearts of those endowed with knowledge, and none but the unjust reject our signs." This type of inward knowledge of the heart cannot be gained or taken from other people, as I mentioned. In other words, it is not knowledge that is based on taqlid or imitation. Okay? This type of knowledge is knowledge that we have to realize for ourselves, and therefore it is based on tahqiq. In other words, realization. This means to make the knowledge real by experiencing it. Therefore, the most important thing that we can do is bring the inner heart to life. When the inner heart comes to life, it is able to receive wisdom and is able to know what is best for the self as well as the correct action to take in any particular situation. So, revelation is our macrocosmic divine guide, okay? And our awakened hearts is our microcosmic divine guide. When the two are combined, we can truly walk in the footsteps of God. So, if we have revelation, we have one half of it. When we have our heart but no revelation, we only have one half of it. When we have both together, we can truly, again, as I said, walk in the footsteps of God. So on this journey of realization or tahqiq, Imam Ali alayhi salam has left us with a lot of advice. And this advice tells us that awakening the inner heart is directly related to dhikr or dhikrullah, that is the remembrance of Allah. For example, it is reported that Imam Ali alayhi salam said, whoever remembers Allah, Allah enlivens his heart and illuminates his intellect and the innermost core of his heart. It is also reported that he said, perpetuate the remembrance of God, for truly illuminates the heart, and it is the most excellent form of worship. At the beginning of this talk, we said that it is only when we are permeated with the names and qualities of God in perfect balance and integration that we live in a state of tawheed, that is oneness, and in a state of ihsan, that is beauty. This is the state that this is the state wherein everything we do is under the control or command of God. Or in other words, it is under the control of our higher nature. Or in other words, it is under the control of the illuminated heart and purified soul. Okay? When this happens, then we continue to come closer to becoming fully human. Now, there are many ways to remember God. And as we have mentioned, one of them is to remember him by the way he has revealed himself to us, that is, through his names and qualities. There are at least three things that happen when we do this. Okay? First, by remembering God and only God, we are polishing the mirror of our hearts. In other words, we are forgetting ourselves and remembering the centrality, primacy, and greatness of God. When we do this, we put ourselves in a state of surrender and acceptance because we are no longer concerned about ourselves. Okay? So by remembering God and his greatness, everything else becomes minor in comparison, including ourselves and our struggles and problems in life. And when everything else becomes minor, our heart, which is usually distracted with all of our problems and issues and situations, all of that becomes removed. Everything else becomes clean and clear. And so that's what it means by polishing the heart. It means creating a ground that is clean and fertile so that eventually later on we can reflect God's names and qualities. Okay? So when we remember God, we are polishing the mirror of our hearts. Um, so doing this, we put ourselves in a state of surrender or acceptance because we are no longer concerned about ourselves. Thus, the remembrance of the remembrance of God is an act of humility which leads to peace and contentment. So again, when you remember God, then all your troubles kind of disappear and go away. This is one of the reasons why the Quran says in, oh, I didn't put the reference here, forgive me, but you can find it. It says, those who believe and whose hearts are set at rest by the remembrance of Allah, and surely by Allah's remembrance are hearts put at rest. Okay? The second thing that happens with dhikrullah, that is, sorry, forgive me. I just came back from teaching a class, so my throat is very dry. So the second thing that happens with dhikrullah is that it brings out the names and qualities of God that are already within us. For example, we are people that can be compassionate, kind, loving, forgiving. Remember, there is a hadith, sorry, I'm going off on this because it's very important to me, forgiveness. There is a hadith that says from Imam Ali alayhi salam that says the sign of intelligence, forgiveness is a sign of intelligence. We need to be, I find that we need to be much more forgiving in our lives. There is a there is a verse in the Quran, if I'm not mistaken, or I think it's a verse, not a hadith, that says, "Why do you not forgive others? Would you not love Allah to forgive you?" So if you expect on the day of judgment, or you hope even that Allah will forgive you on the day of judgment, then why would you not forgive others for any wrongdoings that they have done? We are all humans and we all make mistakes, including ourselves. And so, like the Christians say from the Bible, let the person who has not sinned cast the first stone. So if you have also sinned against others and you hope for God's mercy, then you should, inshallah, also learn to forgive others. Okay. In any case, so we can be compassionate, kind, loving, forgiving, patient, etc. Okay? When we remember God by these names, we are also activating or drawing out those qualities within ourselves. So when you act about the sanctity of God's names have a theurgic power. Okay? They have a divine power to transform us. Okay? Now, when we remember God by these names, we're drawing out those qualities within ourselves. For example, when we call out to God using his title Ar-Rahman, this name resonates with the characteristic of mercy within ourselves and helps bring it to life and to grow. If this quality doesn't exist in ourselves, then it is like planting the seed of our Rahman in ourselves so that eventually, by the grace of God, it can flower and flourish. Okay, so this practice is so important. Uh, I can't even explain it how the importance of this practice. So what is important is simply that you practice it. In any case, now this is what I mentioned before. It's important to remember that it is when we do this, it is not an act of trying to become similar to God. Okay, God is one, absolute, eternal, and there is none like him. Okay, rather, it is an act of trying to negate our own egotistic or subhuman attributes or qualities. According to William Chittick, who many of you may have heard of, he is one of the foremost experts on Islamic spirituality today, in the Western world at least. He says about this practice, he says the following: Man does not gradually grow in this stature until he becomes some kind of demigod rivaling God himself. On the contrary, man is gradually reduced in stature until there is nothing left of him. But since nothing belongs to man in the first place, once he eliminates his own attributes and affects his own and effaces his own self, there remains only that which truly is the face of God. Okay, and then the quote continues, but I'm not gonna quote everything. We have a question. How can the names? So we have we have two questions. How about the names of Allah that represent qualities like yes, mutakabbir? I will talk about that. And we have a second question. Due to our busy lives, how can we constantly remember Allah? Yes, we pray, recite du'as, etc. I will answer both of those. Where is the next question? Oh, actually, okay. So my next pause for a question is at the end of the speech. So I'll answer those questions now, if that's okay. Yes, I will, because I'm going on to the next thing. Okay, so we said that two things happen. So the first question is, how about the names of Allah? Okay, there are certain names of Allah that do not apply to us, and those are not qualities or names that we should be trying to inculcate in inside of us. For example, um, um, you know, the unique or the Punisher or the Master of the Day of Judgment, and so on and so forth. There are certain names that are considered to be for God, only for God, the Creator. So so we would not be saying these names to bring out some kind of, we are not the creators, we are the created. Um, if you want to know exactly which names that are names we should be inculcating within ourselves, names and qualities we should be inculcating in ourselves, and which names we shouldn't be inculcating within ourselves. And also, if you want to know exactly what each name does, there are many, many books that talk about what each name of God does. So, for example, if you're facing a trial and it's not going away and you need patience, so a sabur, or if you're facing if you need God's generosity, you say Al Kareem, Ya Kareem. So each of the names is there's lots of books that speak about each of the attributes and what they do, as well as what attributes we shouldn't try and inculcate in ourselves because it's not for us. One book is called The Name and the Unnamed, and the beginning of this book is actually William Chittick, who I just quoted, writes the preface to this book, and it's a great book. I would recommend to start on your journey to understanding these names better. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. I actually did not put it in the speech, and I should have because it is very important to understand that not all of these names are for us as human beings. Uh, we have another question that says, due to our busy lives, how can one constantly remember Allah? Yes, we pray. Yes, we recite du'as, etc. So in fact, the greatness of dhikrullah, just like the greatness of dua, is the fact of how easy it is. When you say that you pray, your prayer is confined by a particular time and space, right? You have to pray at a particular time, and the place in which you pray has to be set up in a certain way. The beauty of dhikrullah is that there is no constraints on this. And in that sense, it's a greater way of remembering God than prayer because it has no containment, which means that, so for example, for me, and I don't like to use myself as an example, but when I'm driving, a lot of people they will listen to some music, for example, and I'm not saying music good or bad, halal or haram. That's a different topic. But they might listen to some music, they might listen to the radio, a podcast, they might think about their problems. But me, I go on my drive to work and I say, hey, it's a perfect amount of time for me to do dhikr. Also, sometimes I might do dua before falling asleep, but sometimes I might also do dhikr. Or I might make an intention that I will do one tasbih, and it takes about 10 minutes if you use, even it takes 5 minutes if you're just using one name of God. So you do one tasbih of one name of God and you do it in 5 or 6 minutes and you're finished. And the effect of this is so great that the 5 minutes you're putting in is resulting in, I'm making up a number here, but is resulting in like 1,000 years of worship or 1,000 years of growth. And so, just at any moment that you find yourself, if you're cooking, for example, do dhikrullah while you're cooking. Um, you know, and there at any moment in which you feel that you can do dhikr. Now, the beautiful thing about this is dhikrullah eventually leads to the third type of prayer, and I said that the third type of prayer was remembering God constantly in our hearts, right? And that is not it's not an active action. It just happens in your heart. You don't have to make any, it's as natural as breathing, excuse me. You never think about breathing. It just happens, right? And it keeps you alive and it sustains you. Similarly, the last prayer, which is the prayer of the heart, is an unceasing prayer that just happens naturally. You're praying to God without even knowing, like without even actively trying to pray to God. So, in your busy lives, if you can find any moments or times to put into practice the remembrance of God, inshallah, it will lead you to the last prayer where you won't even have to try and do it. It will just automatically be done by itself, and you will find yourself in a state of saying Allah, 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 or Allahu Akbar, or whatever the case may be, without trying. Um, so, yes, again, I'm talking about levels that are so beautiful and so exalted that you have to want it. You have to want it. They give the example of a drowning man. As much as a drowning man wants to breathe, is as much as you should want to achieve this. So if your desire to reach these levels or to become closer to God even is not strong enough, then yes, you will eventually not do the dhikrullah because that want and need and desire is not there. But if it is there, then you will do it. Again, what I'm saying, and this is why my first practical step or my second practical step was dua. If you feel like you want to become closer to God, but you're not that dedicated, then pray to God and ask Him for that dedication, and then put in the effort to try and be dedicated. And like God says, if you take that one step, so maybe you only remember Him for a week, He will make two steps to you, and He will allow you to remember Him for a month, right? So that is why I put prayer as the second practice, or dua, supplication, as the second practice. So if you feel like you can't, then make dua to do it, inshallah. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think that is it for questions. Okay, so just quickly, so we said we polish the mirror of our hearts. Um, we grow the qualities of God in us. Okay, now the final thing when we engage in the practice of dhikrullah, or the remembrance of God, particularly by His holy names and qualities, is that we begin to see God everywhere. As I said, this is because the whole universe is a reflection of God's names and qualities. So if we see a mother showing love to her child, then behind this act, we see the love of God. If we see lightning and thunder right outside a storm, then behind this phenomenon, we see the hope and mercy and strength and power of God. Okay? And to see God in all things is truly a quality of the prophets, the imams, and then after that, the saints and friends of God's. And it's certainly something we should aspire to according to our own capacity. To quote William Chittick one more time, because perfect man, so the complete man, he's talking about Insan Kamil, because the perfect man contains all the realities of both God and the cosmos, he recognizes God in all things. He sees with a vision whereby all veils are lifted. For him, the words of the Quran are concretely realized. Wherever you look, there is the face of God. And that's Surah 2, verse 115. He continues, for perfect man, everything is divine self-disclosure. So everything is God revealing Himself to us in one form or another. Okay? So this even, and we don't like to talk about it, but this even includes, for example, justice and punishment. When we go to court, if we see someone justly being punished for crimes, we see God's justice behind it. Okay? In any case, as I was saying before, there are thousands of books written on the subject. They speak about God's names and qualities and the specific ways in which they have the power to transform us. Also, the remembrance of God, like supplication, as I said, is easy to put into practice, or easier to put into practice, because it is not contained by any time or place. Okay? You just have to make it a habit. And I think there's a book somewhere that's very popular that says it takes 21 days of doing something to turn that thing into a habit. So perhaps you can make the intention of trying to do it for 21 days and see if it turns into a habit. I don't know how true it is, but you can try it for sure. So, to conclude this speech, we spoke about three specific acts of transformation that we can put into our daily lives in order to help us become servants and representatives of God. The first act is one of knowing, that is simply to be aware of the fact that all good comes from God. The second act is the act of supplication. Since all good and guidance comes from God, then we have to turn to God in order to transform ourselves. The third and final transformative act is the act of remembering God, and in this case, we talked about remembering God specifically by the names and qualities that He has revealed to us in the Quran. Okay? Now, as I said, there are many, many more acts that help us towards attaining closeness with Allah. I wanted to speak about these three acts because they are easy to put into practice, again, easier to put into practice in our daily lives. This this gives us a way to start changing ourselves without feeling burdened. The more we engage in these acts, then the more we change, and then the more easily we'll be able to do those practices that we might find harder to do, such as Salatul Layl. Okay? And I will mention one last thing in passing and before ending, or with ending. And I'm doing this because of its incredible power, and I don't feel like I should give a speech about transformation without mentioning this. And this is the act of fasting on Mondays and Thursdays with the intention of asking for God's help with a specific problem. Now, I know this is not part of the things that we would normally consider easy to put into our daily lives, but in my experience, as well as the experience of many others, and it was sunnah of the Prophet. If you are facing something that is so difficult that you are ready to fast for it, then fast on Mondays and Thursdays and ask God with the intention for whatever problem you're facing. And inshallah, I truly believe that by the grace of God, uh, unless He is waiting for a specific time because that time is better for you, I truly believe that whatever it is you're searching for will come to you. This is how powerful this practice is. That if you do it, what you need in your life will come to you. And um, I just it is an extremely powerful practice, and I will leave it at that. Um, so that is concluding our talk. We have about 5 minutes, I think, for any final questions that anyone might have. Um, Before we get okay, well, okay, so yes, fasting Monday and Thursday is mustahab, but not to the extreme. Absolutely. In Islam, nothing should be done to the extreme. Rumi was asked once, Rumi was asked, what is poison? And he said, poison is anything that is beyond what is necessary. The Quran constantly talks about balance and um, the middle way, the middle path. So nothing I say, nothing we do, nothing should be done in the extreme. So to fast Monday and Thursday is not extreme. To fast every day for 2 months straight or 3 months straight might be extreme. And I think the Prophet recommended not doing when someone was fasting a lot. The Prophet in I can't remember now, it was such a long time ago, but the Prophet, when he found someone fasting excessively, told the person to stop. So, yes, absolutely. But I don't think fasting twice a week is extreme, even though in our world today we might find it extreme. But in terms of reality and what God is and what we are here to do in life, it's not extreme, right? We spend so much time moving away from what our purpose is that that's extreme. This is very moderate compared to that. Is there a book on the mustahab? Um, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are many books. Um, what can I think of? I mean, normally, if you read any book on the biography of the Prophet, you'll read about what is recommended acts that the Prophet did and that we can also do. So any biography of the Prophet will contain it. But there are yes, Canadian winter is the best time to fast. So there are many books on what is meant. There are collections of hadith that talk about it. Um, I have a library just filled with these kinds of books, so you can find them anywhere. At the mosque, there's a library. Here, Sheikh Hasnain is telling Sunan an Nabi by Allama Matabai. Yes, so that's perfect. The Sunnah of the Prophet. That's the perfect book. So you can look at that. But they are everywhere. You should not have any difficulty finding them. And yes, Canadian winter is the best time to fast. I will add something. In in um, in Ramadan, we have we have uh, I believe the English translation is there. Yes. Um, in Ramadan, we have a rule that we have to fast from a certain time to a certain time, and that has to be done. That's wajib. It's available on alislam.org, the English translation. We have a rule in Ramadan that we have to fast from a certain time to a certain time. But when we are doing extra fasts that are not wajib, then the whole point is simply to show the effort, to make some sort of sacrifice for God. And so, if we don't want to do a full and complete fast because it's not a wajib fast, it is okay to say to God, God, today I'm going to fast for 5 hours. I'm going to sacrifice my food and drink and everything else. And with that sacrifice of 5 hours, I ask that you do this or that, or help me with this or that. And that's okay to do. There's no problem with doing a shorter fast when we're not, like, for example, doing a wajib fast where we have strict rules to follow, which we should follow because there's a reason behind those rules. But to sacrifice anything for God, I don't see why God would not accept it. So even if you're in the summer and it's not sunset for 10 hours, you can still do 4 or 5, 6 hours and say, I'll sacrifice 6 hours today. There's no problem with that. And I do believe, and in my experience, it is also, it works. Um, this is recorded. Yes, this is recorded. So Sheikh Hasnain put up the recording for the last lecture here, and maybe he will put this one up for the next lecture. But also, they're all available on the Ali website. If I'm not mistaken, I did see all the stuff. Any more questions before we end? Thank you. Um, okay, so Sheikh Hasnain, is okay? So there it is. There's the link. I hope all of you can see it, where you can access the course. So, inshallah, I pray that all of you enjoyed, but more importantly, I really hope that you will benefit from this. Um, we can end if you wish. I don't mind taking a couple more questions if there are any. If there are not, then we will end. Um, While I wait to see if there's another question, I will just say that thank you, thank all of you. I thank all of you, and it really means a lot to me that you are here. The next one, I'm going to talk. I believe I will be talking about some of the things that are happening, modern obstacles that we are facing that are stopping us from achieving these states that we're talking about. And it's very important to. I think it is very important subject because we are living in this modern world. And so we have to know what forces are affecting us and stopping us and hindering us. So when we become aware of those forces, we can overcome them, inshallah. Uh, Thank you. You're very welcome. One more question, Mustahab on ziyarat. Is it recommended to do it daily or not? Um, this is outside of my. So I'm not a legal I'm not a legal scholar. I can always give my opinion, but I think this is a better question directed towards, for example, Sheikh Qasim Ali, Sheikh Hasnain. Um, uh, this type of question, yeah. Just because I don't want to move into things I have not studied with complete things. Um, yeah. So. Uh, Thank you. I'm glad that the speech seems to be well received. Alhamdulillah. Um, you're all very welcome. And again, thank you all for being here with me today. Um, it means a lot. And inshallah, inshallah, it will do some good. Okay. So thank you very much. Bless you too. May Allah bless you too, inshallah. So, okay, I guess that's it then for tonight. Inshallah, I pray that I will see you all next week, next Tuesday, same time, same place, maybe. I don't know where you are, but I'll see you next week, inshallah. Thank you so much. God bless. Um, Assalamu alaikum.